Hi. Hi, Ankush. Thank you very much for agreeing to participate in this conversation with me tonight. Um, my name's Christian McNeill. I'm based in Glasgow, and my business is Elements of Wellbeing. And I'm joined by Coach Ankush Jain, who, well, perhaps you could just say something about who you are and how people can contact you.
Yeah, so how would I describe myself today? It's going to be different every single day, isn't it? So I guess what I do is I'm a coach. I coach based in very much in what's called the three principles. I work a lot with men who have been in the self-development world. I also coach other coaches. I coach anyone that I think I can help. So whilst I kind of say those are my two main areas, I've coached people in business, I've coached women, and anyone that I think I can help. I really enjoy coaching and helping people have significant transformations. I'm nowadays based in London, although at the moment I'm not there. I'm at my parents' place. But yeah, I kind of have clients all over. I feel very fortunate to be able to do what I do for a living, and I hope I've got something of value to share with your audience today, Christian.
I'm sure you have. I'm absolutely sure you have. So the kind of trigger behind this was I've just got this idea at the moment about encouraging sort of grassroots spread of the principles and encouraging people to consider ways that they might be doing it or might get into that. And one of the things that caused me to get in touch with you is that both you and I have come from other jobs, other professions into this world, having speaking for myself, having encountered the principles and been so impacted by them and impressed by outcomes across the board. And I know that that you also came in from another line of work, and it's not so much that either of us is setting out a how to do what we do, but just kind of opening up that possibility and encouraging people to think in different ways of how they might come to work with the principles or not. So perhaps you'd like to say a little bit more of your route into what you do now.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I never really set out to be a three principles based coach. I had been really impacted by various things in the personal development world for about 11 years, and I'd done all sorts of weird and wonderful things, some of which had helped, some of which had been not so helpful. And over that 11-year period, I had seen significant shift and development in myself. Very noticeable shift. One of my best friends would say that the one thing that was constant about me, that I was always changing for the better, and kind of had developed from a really shy, insecure 19-year-old when I got into this work to hopefully a less insecure, shy man, and finally got to the stage 4 years ago where I thought 4.5 years ago that I thought I'm happy, like for the first time, like, okay, I don't feel like I need anything else, don't need any more personal development. And that's when I thought I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to do my corporate job. I liked it; it was okay. But as I was growing and developing, I felt like there was something else I could be doing, but I didn't know what it was. And after many months, and eventually when I gave up trying to work out what it was, I had this inspirational insight, this moment where it suddenly hit me that I should be a coach. Now, at this stage, I didn't really know about the three principles. I had encountered them. I didn't realize I'd encountered them. But I really set out to be a coach and coach people and help people in the stuff that I knew back then. And I accidentally, not on purpose, signed up for a coach training. I mean, that was on purpose. I signed up for a coach training on purpose. But it was an accident that it just happened to be grounded in the principles, and that was with Jamie Smart. And that was when I got introduced to it. But even at the beginning, I never really set out to go, even though it really impacted me. I was like, oh, I'm just going to bring this into the stuff that I already know. But as my exploration deepened, it didn't make sense to coach people in any other way than by pointing them to this understanding. But yeah, it's interesting. I think I'm one of the few people that, I think there's other people that were coaches first and then got to the principles, but I think I'm one of the few people that decided to get into coaching, and the very first thing was 3 principles. Most people have gone into something else and then come to the 3 principles, or they've been impacted by the 3 principles first and then decided to be a coach. And I'm kind of in between, I guess, of those two things.
Oh yeah, interesting. Yes, I also came to it through Jamie Smart, and it also accidentally. I thought I was on Grow Your Business with Integrity. Well, that was what it was called, but I thought it was about NLP, which was my kind of sideline then, and it was all about the 3 principles, and which is one weekend was incredibly impactful. And it struck me when you were speaking there about the changes in you and the impact on you, and it reminded me of how much changed I was by that is one of the kind of absolute essentials, as I see it, for anyone who wants to move into coaching or facilitating in the 3 principles world. That in NLP, which is what I'd done before. So if you had the techniques down, your own sort of transformation was possibly less important. But in this world, your kind of biggest asset is the change that's taken place within, or the extent to which you've been touched by this, or you embodied this. Do you see it that way, or?
See, one thing that I want to say is that people interchangeably use coaching, facilitating, teaching when it comes to the 3 principles.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I make a very clear distinction between that. And when I got a deeper understanding of that distinction, it really helped me. So I thought I wanted to be a coach. I started learning about the 3 principles. I thought this is the best thing ever. Start sharing that with other people. And I kind of was all muddled and confused between teaching, between coaching, between facilitation, between being a practitioner. Like, I didn't know what the differences were. And I really felt that this was a very different direction to traditional coaching. So I didn't really have any reference points. But what I started to see a couple of years ago, in 2015, was that, the 3 principles are an understanding of how our mind works.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And coaches, or coaching, being a life coach, being business coach, being some kind of coach, that's a profession. So you see, and I was hanging around with a lot of coaches who were non-3 principles coaches, but very financially successful. And I did that. I put myself in that position on purpose because I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn from people who were outside of this 3 principles world, but doing well, because I couldn't find the answers for me in where I was looking. And what I found is that there were a lot of coaches doing very, very well for themselves, and they were coaching and they were helping people. And whilst they were coaches using all sorts of different techniques or had different styles, there was something in common in that that made them a coach. And they were working with people who wanted to have a better future than what is their default future, right? So if they hadn't hired a coach, how would their life be? They hire a coach, and the purpose was, in my opinion, to help people have a different future than they would have had. And that very much is a profession, and there's things to be learned in that profession. There's things that work and don't work, and there's different ways you can go about it. But it was a profession in and of itself where you could be successful or not, regardless of whether you understood the 3 principles. And that was a really big kind of turning point for me, because I was like, oh, okay, there's a distinction here. There's something separate. And I started to go, when I look back at the 3 principles community, I'm like, oh, people are really muddling this up. They're saying they want to be coaches, but then they're not coaching. They're teaching, or they're sharing, or they're doing other stuff, but I wouldn't really call it coaching from when I started to understand what coaching really was. And that was really helpful to me. And I remembered a conversation I had with Bob Ost, who was a very early person who was introduced to the three principles, who lived and lives on Salt Spring Island. And she told me about someone who was introduced to Sydney Banks, and at the time said, "Won't go away. It's not about me. I'm not your guru." And this guy went and became an advocate, or a lawyer, solicitor. In Canada, I think they call them an advocate, and became a very successful advocate. And she was saying, well, it was because of his knowledge of the three principles in his job. He brought integrity, and he didn't get caught up in his head or an ego, and that made him very well respected, and he was very successful. And I didn't really piece the two things together straight away, but what started to dawn on me was that's the same thing with coaching. That coaching in and of itself is a profession, which just happens to be one where we help people. But having an understanding of the three principles makes us, in my mind, it gives us an advantage, because all the things that a person would need to do to be a successful coach, I think understanding the three principles makes that easier. It's helpful. And so the questions you ask as a coach, the way you really listen to a client, these are all things that you have to do as a coach. Understanding the three principles makes you more effective in doing that, but it's not the same thing. It's different things. And so seeing that, for me, really shifted my approach, really shifted the way I was with clients, and made it much clearer for me who I was and what I did, which was different to being a three principles teacher. And so when I come across people who want to be coaches or three principles coaches, one of the things, and we talked about this before we started recording, was I like to check in and see, do they really want to be coaches? Because this is a vocation. I call it a profession, but it's a vocation. To me, it's very similar to medicine, or being a lawyer or something like that. In terms of it being a profession, but also because I don't think you can be successful in those professions and dabble, right? You can't kind of like dabble with medical school. Like, people put a lot of investment into learning a lot about biology, about physiology, about pharmacology, and all these things to become a medical doctor, right? It's the same thing with lawyers. They go to law school and then they have to pass the bar. There's a whole lot of things. If they want to become barristers, there's a whole other process to go through. If you want to be a judge, there's a whole other process to go through. But even a great solicitor, there's a lot that goes into that. And again, it's not something you can kind of dabble with, like, oh, let me kind of do a little bit on the side. Maybe I'll review this divorce case you've got, or this commercial property negotiation. Like, it's a vocation. It's what people do. And I very much see coaching quite similar to that. You can build it up part-time slowly, and that's what I did. So I'm not saying you can't do that. But in the long term, for me, it's very much a vocation in terms of, this is what I do. This is what I love to do. I could be making more money doing something else, I'm sure, but it's not about that. And so I really want to question anyone whether they really want to be a coach. And Dick and Bettinger and I were speaking about this last year when I was doing an event for coaches. He said that's the biggest issue. And he comes across so many people who very innocently, with good intentions, learn about the three principles, think this is the best thing since sliced bread, want other people to know about it, which is totally understandable, and then think the next step is to be a coach, and it's not necessary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's interesting. It's funny enough, I was a lawyer and an advocate and a judge before I did that. So, I'm conscious of the approach that's taken to that kind of profession. And I agree. And I would say that I've been every bit as dedicated, in fact, probably considerably more dedicated to this work, because it's something that I'm kind of in heart and soul. Although I suppose I agree that there are different things for people to be clear about if if they want to go on beyond having been impacted themselves. And I loved what you said about, getting clear whether coaching really is what sits right for them. And it can look, but if somebody watches a webinar or hears someone describe what they do at a conference or something, as though it's a very easy, relaxed life, and aspects of it are, and the connection with clients is delightful, and many aspects of it are delightful. But it's not. There is work to be done, isn't there? I mean, it's not. It doesn't all. It hasn't all. I'll speak for myself. It hasn't all landed in my lap. I don't know how you feel about that, but there is a business creation aspect of it, and which I find kind of is also combined with a kind of open mindset and allowing, following one's nose, a quiet, gaining eyes for opportunities. But it's in my case, it's taken some years for my practice to develop to what it is today. I wonder if you've got any thoughts about that whole.
Yeah, I think that there's always cases of people in any profession, in any business, who do very, very well, very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they tend to be the exceptions to the rule. So I know there are some people in this profession who said, oh, well, I read one book on the 3 principles and I just showed up and, oh, look, now things are going well. Mm. And for most of us, like including me, like it didn't work that way. And I don't think it tends to work that way for most people. I do think they tend to be the exception. And like you, I work incredibly hard in what I do. I love it. I enjoy it. My sister's a medical doctor. She loves medicine, but she works incredibly hard. There's a similar thing there. And I work a lot harder in this job, if you like, in this career than I did in my previous career. Sorry, old bosses, but that's true. But no, that's the truth, and I love it, and that's what, if I didn't enjoy it, I'm sure it'd be a lot more of a struggle. But this is like any other business, and I remember listening to an audio by some US coach, I forget the guy's name, and he was saying that, if you had any business and you were starting any business, and he said, look, let's take a typical small business. Let's say you were starting a bookshop. As a small business owner in the USA or in the UK or anywhere, there's some great perks. If your business does well, you can earn significant sums of money. You can go on, you're your boss, you've got no one to report to. You can, do a lot of things that come, there are a lot of positives of running your own business. But he said, for most businesses go bankrupt in the first, or they fail in the first 2 years. And he said, for the first couple of years, at least for most business, not all, I'm sure there are exceptions to this, but for a lot of business in the first couple of years, there's a lot of work to be done, right? So let's say you opened a new bookshop, it take the first couple of years, they're probably putting in a lot of time and effort. And I've got a lot of friends of mine who run their own businesses, and I see the same sort of scenario play out, that they buy a business or they start a business, and the first couple 3 years they're working incredibly hard to establish it. If they've bought existing businesses, they're changing it to make it more profitable, more efficient, their own ideas on it. If they're starting a new business from scratch, they're testing things out, to trying what works. Okay, it doesn't work, discard that, try something else. Building up their reputation, building up customer loyalty, all of these things. And then at a certain point, they're more established, and their hard work pays off. And I see that, and this coach was saying that there's a lot of similarities between that and having a coaching practice, because it's also a business. And when he said that, that was so helpful to me. It was so like, I almost breathed a sigh of relief, because I felt like people were telling me, no, you've just got to get into a nice feeling. And, if you follow your wisdom and intuition, it will guide you around the way. And I felt like if I was working hard, I was doing it wrong. Right. And there had to be this kind of magic way of being even quieter, even more still, even all this other stuff. And that's wonderful. By that, I'm not knocking any of that. I think it's great, and it's been helpful for me to mentally be quiet. Yeah.
I'm going to pause this. Just there we are. Sorry about that slight hitch.
Okay. So I was talking about me mentally quiet. I felt like that was the only answer. And whilst that's been incredibly helpful for me to be mentally quiet and to be mentally still, I realized that, there was also work to be done. And I was like, I almost breathed a sigh of relief going, okay, which is what made sense to me. And I'm like, oh, great. I wasn't doing it wrong. Working hard at the beginning, trying things out, testing things, getting experience, that all helps, that all works. And yes, with like any job that I've taken at the beginning, I would work really hard because I'm trying to figure it out. I'd establish myself, and then it kind of settles down. And I found the same thing with coaching, like I was very inefficient first. I'm doing things for the first time. It's slow. Spending hours doing things that probably shouldn't have been doing, in hindsight or whatever else. But that's the nature of building a business to me. And again, I think, I'll come back to the previous point. Do you really want to be a coach? Because, again, like any kind of entrepreneur, because we're entrepreneurs, we work for ourselves, we create our own business, we're doing the whole piece, I'm guessing, for most people who are self-employed coaches or limited company coaches with one coach working, right? You're doing the whole piece. So again, whether you're an entrepreneur traditionally or as a coach, is the same thing. You've got to go through the same process. And if it's not something that you really want to do, chances are you're going to struggle at it.
Yeah. I know, absolutely. And just on that point of discovering whether it really is someone's vacation, what are some of the questions you might suggest people ask themselves?
I wouldn't. I think people are far too, they're in their heads about this stuff already. Right? So I wouldn't suggest sit down and ask yourself this question or that question. I really would encourage people to just go and have a go.
Yeah.
Go and try it out. I decided that I wanted to become a coach, but I didn't really know. And then I reached out to someone who had met at a networking event. She had asked for some advice from me. I'd helped her. And then I said, well, can you help me? I want to practice coaching on you, right? Like that's how I started 4.5 years ago. And so I had a couple of conversations with her, and I was hooked. I talked what very little I knew, shared something, drew a couple of things on a piece of paper, and I was very, it was very basic. This was a long time ago, and I'm sure if I coached her now, it'd be very different. But her eyes opened up, and she saw possibilities where she hadn't seen possibilities before. And I walked out of that meeting that we had for like an hour and a half or whatever. And I was walking to my car, I remember, and I was like floating on air, and I was like, yes, this is amazing. If I get to do this for a living, how wonderful would that be? So I was hooked straight away. So I would encourage people to go and try it out. And, people might be reluctant to spend a lot of money, or maybe they don't have a lot of money to spend on a coach or on a training or whatever. And I was talking to someone about this today, that if you're really keen, if you really want to try this out, there are so many resources available, right? Like I run a group for coaches. I don't let everyone into the group, but all the videos are on YouTube. And people can go through, hours worth of content with some amazing coaches. It's like doing your own program, right?
Yeah,
for free.
yeah.
It's all there. There are a bunch of Facebook groups for coaches and for 3 principles, where if people are brave enough to ask a question, you will get so much help back. So, if you post up and say, hey, I'm trying out coaching. and whatever question you've got, either I'm struggling to get into conversation with someone, or I've got a conversation coming up, I have no idea how to approach it, or I'm thinking about approaching this group of people, I have no idea how do I do that? Can anyone give me advice? If you've got very practical questions, you may be amazed at just how helpful other people are in terms of giving you advice and sharing their knowledge and expertise with you. And so whilst it isn't the same as having a coach, I'm not going to pretend like, oh, you don't need a coach, just go and do this stuff. It isn't the same.
Yeah.
But there's an awful lot more help out there than I think people are really taking advantage of.
Yeah. And you touched on having a coach, and I mean, I think there are many ways into this work, and indeed finding a way to be sharing the principles doesn't, as you've pointed out, doesn't have to just be through coaching. I mean, it can be with groups, or it can be through writing about it, or there are often opportunities once people start to get into that creative bit to do it within an existing job, and so on. So finding what's right for an individual, I'm all in favor of. But I do also think that some kind of FaceTime, as opposed to just being a passive recipient, is useful for most people. I hesitate to generalize because there's always exceptions, but I do think something of a safe place where you can ask the stupid questions, or have someone, and there are no stupid questions, I know, or have someone hold up a mirror to you. I have found that an incredibly invaluable part of the process, I would say, for me, and ongoing. I just said that putting myself in a position where I am both a pupil and a teacher, if you like, and I suppose in my case, I have probably a broader. You're more of a specialized coach. I work with one-to-one coaching clients, but I also work with groups and so on as well. So, and I don't necessarily consider what I do there coaching. So, without getting too hung up on the term, in my case, it's I would see it as broader. But I do find that having a bit of both is useful. That there's always more to learn, and it can be someone who's much newer to this than me that has something for me to hear, or for me to see differently.
Yeah, I don't distinguish too much. So I do actually do training events as well. So last year I did, like, I don't do loads, but last year I did kind of 4 different events, 3 for men, 1 for coaches. This year I've got, I've come back from Vegas where I've been speaking. I'm going to be in Dublin in a couple of days doing a talk, and then the next day I'm doing a workshop for coaches. I'm doing an event for women. I'm doing an event for men. I do both. For me, it's all part and parcel of coaching. And I think one of the wonderful things about this as a profession, whether you're a 3P coach or a non-3P coach, is there's no one way to do this. So some people say, oh no, you need to, I remember reading online, some guy said, you cannot be successful in this profession only doing one-on-one coaching. You need to do this other stuff. And I said, that's simply not true. I mean, just look at Steve Hardison, right? He's got a waiting list of clients. He charges $150,000 and he's only done one-on-one coaching. Right, and he's an extreme example, but he's an example of someone who shows us that you don't need to do it, the way people tell you to. And one of the things that I've discovered is that the thing to do is do what you enjoy. Mm-hmm. So, I started off with one-on-one coaching. That's what I really enjoy. I trialed out some live events. I didn't do them the way that everyone else was doing them, and I don't. I keep them short. I go small groups, really deep. That's what I find I enjoy, and keeping them quite high end, if you like, because I feel like you get more transformation out of it. And I can be very fussy, because if I'm not trying to fill 100 people in a room, I've only got a small group, I can be fussier about who I let into that. So, and I found I really enjoyed those, so I did those. I'm currently writing a book, and again, I knew at some point I might do that, but just at a certain point, it's like, oh, it feels like the right time for me to write a book. I tried trialing it out, sent it to my coach, and he's like, oh, this is really good. I'm like, oh, cool, I'll carry on doing it then, and hopefully that will be out at some point this year. So I just try things out, and there's no one way to do that. Some people do live group events, and that's mainly what they'll do, and very little coaching. Someone else will be doing mainly book writing and do the odd event here or there. Someone will just do a bit of everything. It really just depends what you enjoy doing, and you don't need to work it out at the beginning. I think you can't know that. You can't know that intellectually. I didn't think I would enjoy doing groups, and when I did the first one, I was like, oh, this is really good. Like, this has surprised me how much I've enjoyed it. So one thing I've learned in my career so far, in my coaching career, is that I can't decide beforehand if something I do is going to be enjoyable or not, because I've been proved wrong so many times of doing things that I thought I wouldn't enjoy, and I've actually really enjoyed it.
Oh, great. And what's next?
I have no idea. So I know, I kind of know, like I said, I know I'm going to Dublin in a couple of days. So I know I'll be talking over there. I'm one of my experiments has been doing a group for women. So that's happening in April. I've got an event planned for coaches. I'm doing something for men in May. I've got an event planned for coaches in October or November. I'm not going to say exactly what it is yet, because I need to have it confirmed.
Air of mystery.
Yeah, there's someone, people might be able to work it out, but there's someone that, so last year I did an event with Steve Chandler, and I did that because I thought this is going to really help people. And so this year I've got someone else in mind, who I want to do an event with, who I think would really, really help coaches. And it's a first generation 3 principles person. And we're currently talking about that, and I think that would be incredibly helpful for coaches. So I've got that coming up, but I just don't know. And I think that's the wonderful thing again about this profession. I don't plan like a year in advance, this is what I'm going to do. I have a few things that are around, and then I keep space open for new things to show up, and I really enjoy working that way. And so, a month before I started writing my book, I didn't know I was going to write it. A week before I announced that I'm doing a women's immersion, I didn't know I was going to do it. I had no idea. So there's a lot of things, and some things I plan on doing that just don't happen.
Yeah.
I have ideas and they don't come off, but I just stay open with it. And this is just a huge learning journey for me, and it's just so much fun. That I who knows? Like I could not have imagined 4 years ago that I would be doing what I'm doing in the way that I'm doing it. And so, even a year ago, things happen so quickly. So who knows what's going to happen in the next year?
Yeah. To quote Keith, the future is an unknown equation.
Absolutely. That's really true.
Yeah. Oh, Ankush, I'm just conscious of our time, and we've actually gone on slightly over what we originally discussed. So thank you so much for taking the time to be interviewed tonight. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed our conversation. Is there anything that you'd like to say just to close?
No, I think it's great that you're producing these videos. I'm a real big fan of producing content. I can't do everything, and I'm getting busier and busier. So, but I have to be careful what I now say yes to or not. But I really wanted to support this because I think it's really needed. Despite what some people think, people out there are running training programs and coaching programs and all the rest of it. They're not out there trying to monetize the principles and take your money. And because I think there's an element of that, and that's simply not true. I've seen just, the costs of these things to do them, and the investment that people put into them, is fairly significant. But at the same time, I think it's great to do things like this, which help people, which give people hopefully a better indication of what coaching's about and what they need to do to be successful before they move forward. And I would just say to people, look, the best judge of what you should do is you.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if you want to be a coach, only you can know that.
Mm-hmm.
The way you go about it, if you hire a coach or you do a training program or you choose to do none of it, the best judge of that is going to be you. I think one of the things that every single person, I believe, would agree on, who is in this community, who is sharing the principles, whether through coaching, whether through psychology or something else, I think every one of us wants this understanding to get out there and reach more people. And so, you know, like I kind of mentioned before, there are a lot of people out rooting for your success. So, including you and I.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
you know, please know that there are a lot of people out there to help. And if you feel like the only way to move forward is to do some kind of expensive coaching or training, not that I'm saying they're not helpful, they can be incredibly helpful, but it's not the only thing you need to do. And there are a lot of people out there to help and support you along the way.
Absolutely. Thank you. And it just occurred to me, just taking one step, I can start that journey. Just the next step is all you need to know. Yeah. So lovely. Listen, thank you so much, Ankush. I really appreciate your time, and I hope to see you again soon. And you can check out your website at ankushjain.com. Is that right?
No, it's ankushjain.co.uk, which is ANKUSHJAIN.co.uk.
And you've also mentioned your videos on YouTube. They're a great
My
resource.
website is probably the portal to go through, and if anyone wants to contact me and ask me questions, I'm happy to help out there.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Good night.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you all for listening.